Welcome to Monday Night Live, the YouTube show all about Notre Dame football from the staff at ND Sport, Inside ND Sports. I almost goofed up our name, and the Rivals Network that will either talk you onto or off the ledge when it comes to following the Irish and coach Marcus Freeman's first season. I'm Eric Hansen. He's Tyler James. Our recruiting writer Kyle Kelly is burning up our Insider Lounge message board with all kinds of breaking recruiting news, including the latest regarding a quarterback in the 2023 cycle. Meanwhile, Tyler and I will break down tonight Notre Dame's 35-32 survival of Navy and spin it forward into the larger context of the season. We'll also take your questions, and that segment is coming up soon, so start filling up the question portal.
Yeah, and also make sure you hit the thumbs up to like this video and subscribe. That helps us get in front of more viewers. And if you're unaware of how to submit questions, if you're on a desktop, it should be to the right-hand side of the chat box where you can put in questions for us to answer, which for future reference, you can actually submit questions in advance. We set up the link usually about 24 hours in advance of when the show starts. And so you can submit questions, which Mike DeVoy has already done to get us going. So that can also help us out. But before we get into those questions, we're going to have Eric share with us the 5 most important headlines from Marcus Freeman's press conference earlier Monday. Eric, what was your first headline?
We're going to start with growth process. I thought it was pretty interesting today that he was asked kind of what have you learned from the beginning of the season, all the different things you went through, a gamut of experiences, field storming and sweating out Saturday's victory and everything in between. And I thought it was really interesting. He shared the advice he had gotten from other coaches, which nobody told him what to do. They said, you'll figure it out, be yourself, gave him guidelines, but really and the way he handles things is the reason why I am more confident than maybe some other people are about the long-term viability of him being a really good coach. He's made some missteps, but his process of kind of combing through everything every week and even taking a hard look at himself in the mirror, I think is really significant. So I got a lot out of hearing about his process. If you'd like to read more about it, it's the lead item in my notebook that's up on our site right now.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. He said there is no book for this, and I thought that would be a great title for a coaching book. So if Marcus Freeman wants to write a book after he's done, I'll volunteer my services. I can help him out, and we can write a book about coaching that says there is no book for this. I thought that was kind of funny, but yeah, I mean, it makes sense that you do have to learn as you go. I think that's the reason for so long we were pretty adamant that whenever Notre Dame hires its next head coach, it needed to be someone with head coaching experience. And I think I can speak for both of us that when Marcus Freeman was hired, we felt like there were other things to his resume and what he represents and what he can do for Notre Dame that sort of maybe made up the difference for that. But obviously some of the things that have happened in his first season as head coach have probably pointed to his lack of experience as a head coach. I guess I would say it's understandable. I mean, I can understand also fans being a little bit uneasy about that and like, hey, this was a program that was in good shape. Did we have to go through these ups and downs right away when he took over such a winning program? But that's this position Notre Dame's in. Obviously, they can still go out and have had some big wins and finish the season with a pretty good record, even though that no one would have predicted that a good record would include losses to Stanford and Marshall. So I think the Navy game was still another learning point for Marcus Freeman, for Tommy Rees, for the players on the field. And you have to figure out what you can extrapolate from that loss or from the win and be glad that it wasn't a loss because it's more it's easier to learn after a win, and it's not as heartbreaking if the things that you did that you maybe weren't proud of still didn't cost you a victory. So Notre Dame can at least spin forward with that and try to learn those lessons and put them forward for the next 2 games of this regular season.
Yeah, I've covered a lot of football coaches in my career because I'm old. and a bunch of first-year coaches at different schools, including Notre Dame. And the one thing that I really like about Marcus is that the way he reacts to things, the way he processes things. After the Navy game, you're just like, oh my gosh. And then you talk to him today and you're like, this guy's got it together. He's handling it. He's
Right.
processing this. And that's not always the case. There's a lot of first-year coaches that'll get very defensive and they'll kind of pick a battle with the media and they'll dig their heels in and they won't admit to mistakes. And so I really like the way that he's processing things.
All right, Eric, what is your second headline from today's press conference with Marcus Freeman?
Yeah, I wrote about this Sunday night, so it wasn't a huge headline today, but I wanted to make people aware that weren't aware that Phil Jurkovec, the former Notre Dame quarterback, will be coming back to Notre Dame Stadium for the first time since he transferred. They've played on the road against Phil before, but he is not going to play. He has had, in the Connecticut game that they played on October 29th, a 13-3 loss for BC. He suffered a concussion. He suffered a knee injury. He suffered a back rib injury. And so a young man by the name of Emmett Moorhead, a redshirt freshman, has come in and kind of lit it up with Phil on the sidelines. I'm not sure when Phil is healthy what they're going to do. This kid has thrown for 330 yards in each of his starts. One was a couple weeks ago, was the 38-31 loss to a pretty good Duke team with a good defense coached by Mike Elko, the former Notre Dame defensive coordinator. And then they took out a ranked NC State team on the road, 21-20, in a last-minute drive that he led, 330 yards again. Cumulatively, he has 7 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. Phil Jurkovec right now is 92nd in the country in pass efficiency, which is 60 spots below Drew Pine. If you're unhappy with Drew Pine, just think about Phil Jurkovec. I think Phil Jurkovec is a marvelous talent. He has a pretty bad offensive line at Boston College, bad running game, and he's had bad luck, but very talented kid. It's too bad it hasn't worked out for him.
Yeah, and I know there's been plenty of hypothetical conversations of what Notre Dame would be if Phil Jurkovec was still at Notre Dame, if they would have won or lost the games against Stanford or Marshall. But this season has been not a great one for Phil Jurkovec either. I would like to think that if Phil Jurkovec stayed at Notre Dame, he wouldn't have dealt with the same issues, especially in terms of the offensive line talent, and probably would be at a different point of his career. Now, obviously, you never know, like, would he have got injured the way he got injured at Boston College? That changed things. I mean, there's a good chance as well that if Phil Jurkovec stayed at Notre Dame, became the starter last year and was really good, then maybe he's no longer in college anymore. Who knows? Who's to say that? But certainly things – it started out pretty well for him at Boston College, and he wanted to play. That's why he left. He's like, I want to play. I don't want to sit behind the in-book, and he got an opportunity to do that. So I doubt he has many regrets about his decision, but I'm sure it hasn't necessarily been pleased with how the things have played out these past two seasons for himself.
He does have another season of eligibility. There is speculation he might hit the portal again based on how Emmett Moorhead finishes the season in discussions with his head coach, Jeff Hafley. I should also mention George Takis, the former Notre Dame tight end, will be back and is expected to play. And John McNulty, who was Notre Dame's tight ends coach at the end of the Brian Kelly era, he's Boston College's offensive coordinator.
All right, Eric, what is your third headline from Marcus Freeman's Monday press conference?
It is senior moments, and there were some different aspects of Notre Dame Senior Day. Usually it's pretty standard. There's 500 seniors that run out of the tunnel with their parents, hug them, give the mom roses, and, it's very emotional. It takes about 2 hours to go through everybody. And Marcus has changed that to just include the people that are seniors that are not coming back next year. Because a lot of guys, they'll come out come out there as a senior, then you see him again the next year as a fifth-year senior. And so that they're just going to round up all the people who are not coming back, who are actual seniors. So somebody like Michael Mayer wouldn't be out there, who's a junior, but all the seniors, and they're putting that number at 25. They haven't released all who that entails yet. We're supposed to get that list at least before they come running out of the tunnel. I also thought it was interesting about how special he wanted to make this for the seniors and how special these seniors have been for Marcus Freeman. He said, these guys didn't pick me. They kind of inherited me, and I had all these different missions and values, and really was building from the ground up, and they really implemented those. They weren't just words on the wall, and he really feels like he's always going to be indebted to them for being able to do that. And so I thought that was pretty interesting take too.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure how I feel about it. I mean, it's good for us. I mean, it'll give us some sort of clarity in terms of who's planning to come back and who's not. There's nothing that's like obviously Marcus Freeman is describing it as the intention of all these guys we don't expect them back next year. Like, but what if maybe someone wanted to change their mind and they ended up having a spot for them? Like, there's nothing that's binding to this decision that would change them from being able to have that person come back. So, I mean, it's just, I guess it's kind of tough to like know for sure. I mean, some guys do know for sure at this point, but there may be some guys that aren't necessarily sure, and figuring that out, and maybe how they feel now would be different in two weeks or even a month from now. So I understand. I guess it maybe just be a little bit awkward the first time going through, and especially with the way the season has gone, it's like this is probably the last thing that should have been on their mind of whether or not they need to know by the middle of November if they're coming back next season. So it's a little bit interesting to me. I'm curious to see how it plays out. I mean, you could be a guy that maybe isn't sure and goes out there for senior day, has that moment. It's like, you know what, I need to come back again. I want to come back again, and maybe that changes your decision, or maybe you get hurt in the last 2 games of the year, and that changes your decision. But like I said, obviously there's nothing binding to this way that they're doing it, but it's just an interesting way to do it. And I do like the idea of like guys getting to really, it's your one senior day. This is what it means.
Right.
It does mean a lot. And so to have that special moment and for it to be less a parade of endless guys coming out of the tunnel on that senior day.
Okay. Agreed.
All right. Marcus, Eric, what is your headline for Marcus Freeman's press conference?
The future at linebacker. It was interesting in the Navy game. Really 3 really vaunted recruit linebackers. Prince Colley, who's a sophomore, who was a Butkus High School award winner, and then junior Tui Halamaka, a Rivals 250 guy, and then Jalen Sneed, who was the highest ranked freshman in Notre Dame's class. They all played some interesting roles on Saturday. Colley got a career high 38 snaps, had a career high 7 tackles. Junior had 1 tackle. He played a career high 29 snaps. Jalen played 9 snaps in a really specific role where Navy went to big personnel. He came in and was one-on-one with their tight end. And Marcus was like, Colley and Tui Halamaka struggled because, they weren't used to playing against triple option. It's really difficult. And yet he felt like there was some real benefit for those guys getting that many snaps, and even with some of the mistakes. And that, now when they go back to traditional defenses, they'll be more ready to play in high leverage situations. Also, when they play Navy in the 2023 opener next year in Ireland, they may be people that can help them win that game and not have anxious moments in the fourth quarter. And then Sneed, I think it's important for him to get on the field, and I'm glad that he's in a position to do that, because he's a guy that could really be a prototypical rover player where his coverage skills are advanced, and he's just a freak athlete. the hope is that he turns into somebody like Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. I know that's a tall order. I'd hate to put that on him, but he was almost a 5-star, and Jeremiah was a 3-star, so he could blossom into. But he's that kind of athlete, and so we'll see if he turns into that kind of linebacker.
Yeah, and Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah needed time to become Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah too, even though he didn't have the same sort of star rating as Jalen Snead coming out of high school. But I think patience is needed and should be understood there. It was nice to see him. I was a little bit surprised, like, wait a minute, Jalen Snead, that was not what I was, especially against the option to make your debut. That was unexpected, but Marcus Freeman talked about them having a specific role for him, especially when they knew J.D. Bertrand was going down and not going to be able to play, that they were able to sort of plan ahead for that and give him very specific directions of this is what you need to do. And sort of compare that to Marcus, compare that to when he was a freshman. I think he said it was the Iowa game that he finally got some specific defensive responsibilities after playing some special teams. Now, Jalen hasn't even been playing on special teams, so that this was a change for him, but that's in part related to the ability to redshirt him. Both he and Jabron Payne made their debuts as freshmen this week, and that they will be allowed to play in the remainder of the games and still be eligible for a redshirt season. So Jabron Payne's role was on the kick return team. And I don't know that we'll see him in the offense because the backfield's already crowded as is, but it was nice to see those freshmen get out there. Junior Tuihalamaka, especially as someone who we saw play a little bit of Viper defensive end. So he's getting a lot of different things thrown at him, but given an opportunity to do that. And Notre Dame's linebacker depth has been tested, and that was not something that was really a concern coming into the season, but with injuries, and then some of your other linebackers may be playing some other positions, there isn't necessarily a long list of linebackers there anymore, especially guys that have been able to impact the team this season. So it was interesting to see all those guys out there, and I imagine some valuable experience for those guys moving forward. All right, Eric, what is your fifth headline from Marcus Freeman's press conference on Monday?
Right. And we'll have a bonus one that wasn't from the press conference because we want to get to that, and that's the 2023 quarterback situation.
Sure.
But my fifth headline is regrouping. It's better spelled out than print. It is. Yeah, it's a worse pun when you say it out loud. And I'm talking about Blake Grupe, who is Notre Dame's 6th-year senior kicker from Arkansas State, a transfer. Started out really strong this year, 8 out of his first 10 field goals. He's 2 out of his last 5, and he's missed field goals in 4 straight games. He missed I believe it was a 45-yarder in the Navy game on Saturday. They had a 4th and 2. They decided to kick the field goal kind of late in the first half, and he missed that. Fortunately, on the very next play, Clarence Lewis intercepted a pass, and Notre Dame went down and scored a touchdown and then another touchdown to finish the half kind of on a flourish. But I was kind of fishing to see if Marcus was thinking about changing kickers or how he felt about, this recent slump. And he's willing to stick with Grupe. They're going to try to work on his confidence and practice. He definitely has the leg to do it. 4 of his misses are between 40 and 50 yards, but they've not been short. It's been the aim. He was wide right on Saturday. So Blake Grupe trying to get his groupies back.
Yeah, kind of like I was talking about earlier. It's easier to learn from a loss or from a win. Man, I can't say that, but I mean to say it. Blake Grupe's been fortunate to not have those field goals cost Notre Dame games because, especially as a field goal kicker, when you miss kicks that cost a team games, you get vilified pretty quickly, and you get a lot of heat thrown your way. And he's avoided that because of the situations where his kicks have been missed as of late. But Notre Dame needs him to be better. They can't be leaving points off the board because he can't convert on field goals. Maybe not as much against Boston College, but certainly against USC. Those are points that you're going to need to have converted in those situations. Now maybe you just keep scoring touchdowns all season and don't have to worry about it. It doesn't become an issue, but yeah, they have to figure it out. That Marcus Freeman said, "Hey, we're confident in him. We need him to know that we are confident in him, and so we're not being afraid." And kicking that field goal or attempting that field goal against Navy was evidence of that, but then it sort of backfired. So I think Marcus said something to the effect of, "Don't make me look like a liar," today. So he wants Blake Groupie to reestablish and prove why he's confident in him. So that is something that is a legitimate concern. I know we had some concerns about Blake Groupie going into the season, more so like during the spring, he wasn't great. And even in camp, we didn't get to see him a lot. So I was at least wondering, like, are they hiding something from us because we're not getting to see any of the field goal sessions? But he started the season fine and has certainly tailed off here towards the end, but we'll see if he can get that figured out.
Okay. Before we go to our off topic, which is the 2023 quarterback, go ahead and get your questions ready in the question queue. We see some of them coming in.
Yes.
And I apologize for the people that submitted them to me on Twitter and wanted me to plug them in there. I am too inept to figure out how to do that for you. So there were some decent ones. Maybe at some point I can, I don't know if we can make that work somehow, because Tyler likes to show them on the screen. And if I can't paste them in there, then we're not able to do that. But anyways,
we can try to circle back to them. I want to give priority to the people that figured out how to do it, and I know that are watching live here. So.
And how do people that don't know how to do it, how do they do it?
Yeah, so if you're on a desktop, you make sure you're on YouTube, whether it's the site itself or a YouTube app. If you're on a mobile device, to the right-hand side of the video screen with our lovely faces, there should be a chat box where you can submit questions. And then if you're on a mobile device, or using the app, there should be a chat box below that. And you should be able to see the questions that Mike DeVoy and Joe Mikelski and Scott Fegan have submitted. So that's the area where you need, below them is where you should be able to post a comment. And that will be sent our way, and we can decide if we want to ask that or not. And we don't like not respond to many questions. We tend to get to as many as we can. So don't be shy about submitting a question, and we will do our best to try to get to it. But before we do that, Eric, what should we tell the people about today's latest development with 3-star quarterback Kenny Minchey announcing that he is decommitting from Pittsburgh?
Well, I'll tell you what, it's been a weird, long, winding road to get to this point, but Notre Dame may end up with a decent quarterback in its 2023 class after all. We do know Kyle Kelly's been working on this. Tyler's been working on it some too. And I've been writing about other things and ignoring it other than people texting me. But why don't you kind of go through, I'll throw my 2 cents worth in there, but why don't you give what we've reported to this point?
Yeah. So the most amount of details you can get will be exclusive to our subscribers on Inside ND Sports. Kyle Kelly has a fairly detailed post on the Insider Lounge, and we've been monitoring this. It's really been within the last about 24 hours from when we're speaking right now that we were first alerted about there being some potential smoke here with Notre Dame and Kenny Minchey. First word that we got of it was more from Pittsburgh side. It's like, hey, we're hearing that Pittsburgh's a bit worried about what's going on with Kenny Minchey. And I was like, oh, that's kind of news to me, because there's been not much happening on the quarterback recruiting front for Notre Dame. And Kenny Minchey was a guy that Notre Dame had targeted this summer. He was one of the guys that they looked at when Dante Moore made his decision to commit to Oregon. And Kenny Minchey was one of the handful of guys that Notre Dame decided to target after that. He had been pretty steadfast in his commitment to Pittsburgh and didn't follow through on making a visit to Notre Dame. And now, so the next step in this process, that now that he's decommitted, is trying to get him on campus, which we believe will happen. But there have been other quarterbacks this year that we believe were going to visit Notre Dame that didn't actually follow through with that, even as recent as the week of, or even a couple of days before the visit was supposed to happen. Some things fell through, but We expect, at least at this point, that Kenny Minchey will visit Notre Dame this coming weekend for the Boston College game. And if things go well, that could be Notre Dame's long-awaited answer at the quarterback position in this 2023 recruiting cycle, which has had so many ups and downs, like you've mentioned, Eric. And I'm curious to see how it plays out from here.
He's 6'3", 205 pounds, from Hendersonville, Tennessee, which is kind of near Nashville. Same high school, Pope John Paul II, I guess it is. It's Golden Tate's high school. So
Pope John
they
Paul
probably
II.
have Maple Bar, John Paul II.
You nailed it. Yep.
They probably have maple bars in the cafeteria there.
Yeah, so like we said, stay tuned to or stay locked on the Insider Lounge message board and Inside ND Sports all week. We will be updating our subscribers as much as we possibly can. And
lots of other recruiting stuff happening this week too.
Yeah, and there will be more recruiting news. Kyle even placed a Rivals Futurecast for a different recruit earlier today. So make sure that you are keeping up with the latest ongoings with recruiting. All right, let's get to questions, and let's lead off with one that sort of dovetails with what we were just talking about there with Kenny Minchey, and that's from Joe Mikelski. Does ND still take a transfer QB even if they get Minchey in the 23 class? What is the percentage chance that ND's starting QB next season isn't on the roster?
Yeah, my answer for this has changed since the beginning of the season. And irregardless of Minchey, they need to have a transfer portal quarterback that can compete to start. That's my belief, and I believe that that's also what Notre Dame believes. I think maybe going into the season before Tyler Buchner got hurt and giving him lots of chances to get experience, maybe if you were going to go in the transfer portal, you would be looking at somebody that would be kind of backup caliber, but they need a starting quarterback. Kenny Minchey's not going to be in the starting mix. Steve Angeli's not going to be. I mean, it's really going to be Tyler Buchner, Drew Pine, or the transfer quarterback. What is the percentage chance that the QB isn't on the roster? I would still give Tyler Buchner at least a 50-50 chance to win that, because I think he really is talented. But I think Notre Dame's going to be able to bring in somebody pretty good. And they need somebody with experience. We've seen that. If we don't want to run, what do they call that? The burn offense. I know it's not the burn offense. What's that one? Scan offense.
Oh, the scan. I wasn't sure what you were.
I was trying the Mike Bray's version of.
Yeah,
of
I know what the burn offense is, but I wasn't sure which offense you were trying to refer to.
So a quarterback that can do all those things at the line of scrimmage, and then also perform like a dynamic quarterback. I think there's person that they bring in is going to be pretty good.
Yeah, and I think because of that, I would probably go with 60% chance that Notre Dame starting QB isn't on the roster, and then 40% that it is. And I would sort of reserve the right to change that depending on who we see ends up coming in as that 2023 or as that transfer in the offseason. I would lean heavily towards that occurring this offseason. I think that there's just too much unknown going into next season and uncertainty, and not enough proven talent. Although and plenty of people could argue that was the same case going into this past offseason. And I think this season maybe changed Notre Dame's opinion on how it wants to handle that in the future. So I think that they will go in that direction. And if it's someone that's really good, I think that person would become the favorite. But I think Tyler Buchner is certainly going to get a chance at it. Drew Pine would as well. You can't totally rule that out. I think Drew Pine will certainly have the longest resume at Notre Dame of any of the candidates. But I think that at this point, I would say slightly more likely than not that next year's starter is not on the roster right now. But I wouldn't think it would be Kenny Minchey either, to be clear. Although you can't rule anything out, but that would be surprising. All right, next question is from Mike Devoy. Tyler, could you and Eric explain why Houston Griffith played so many snaps? Seemed like he has not played much this season until Navy.
Tyler, how many snaps did he play? Do you know?
He played 28 snaps against Navy.
Okay, that's not a huge number, but
and he has I can fill you in 272 defensive snaps for the season.
Right. Brandon Joseph was hurt, so you were down a safety.
Right.
And Notre Dame at times was playing, I think, 3 safeties, and that might have been after Jack Kaiser got hurt, and he was playing kind of a safety position instead of linebacker in the game, the way that they had things set up. But they wanted to get as many people that were experienced against the option. I mean, Houston Griffith's been around a long time. He's seen the option a lot. And again, with Brandon Joseph out, there were, 4 healthy safeties that could take snaps. So I think just kind of the math worked out that he played a lot. I'll tell you, he's one of the most befuddling players that I have ever covered because he was a great athlete in high school, highly rated recruit, great attitude, always a winner, workout warrior, great teammate, and it just hasn't happened for him.
And he played as a freshman.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, that's like the most, it's like he was good enough to like get out there as a freshman, but it just like the next level, they just couldn't find it for him. And he never really got there in terms of being a defensive stalwart. Like he's been a contributor, but I don't know. He was never one of the best players on Notre Dame's defense. And his participation has gone up and down. I mean, he's played throughout the season, like we mentioned, 272 snaps defensively. That had gone down a little bit recently and then come back up there with the injury to Brandon Joseph. So that sort of explains
who's still listed as questionable this week. So.
Right. Yeah. Thanks for mentioning that. That is important. And we'll see if he gets back on the field as we try to parse Marcus Freeman's questionable, doubtful diagnoses that he's been giving us throughout the season. He was questionable last week and didn't play. I would like to think there's a little bit better chance that he plays this week, but I think it's probably too soon to say. He did not practice on Sunday, so we'll see if he practices Tuesday or moving forward. I know last week when we went over to do interviews after practice on Tuesday, I saw Brandon Joseph was wearing a walking boot, and I was like, yeah, he's probably not playing this week if he's in a walking boot. And now I know, like, even at times Jared Patterson has been wearing a walking boot just to protect his foot this year, even while he's been playing. So there is some benefits to wearing it, even if you're still going to try to play. But we'll see what his availability is this weekend. But that Houston Griffith hasn't played really poorly. I mean, there's been some bad moments there, but he's been okay. He's been just, I guess, maybe unremarkable.
He's assignment correct.
Right. Yeah. He's usually in the right place. He doesn't necessarily always make the play, even if he is in the right place. And that can be a little bit troubling and frustrating, especially from a coaching staff perspective. But they do trust him. They can feel confident that he can get in there. And that's certainly against Navy. You want guys that you could trust. So he was one of those guys that Notre Dame was willing to put out there. All right. Next question is from Scott Fegan. Can you explain why the ND defense cannot make the necessary second half adjustments, fourth quarter, red zone, etc.?
Well, I'll tell you, I was more concerned about the offense not making adjustments in that game. I mean, you go from 323 yards in the first half to 12 in the second half. 12 in a game that wasn't in a hurricane? Are you kidding me? 0.9 yards per play. I was more alarmed with that. I think some of the reasons in this specific game that there was an adjustment issue was that Marcus Freeman wanted to play more prevent defense than being aggressive, which Notre Dame was aggressive earlier in the game. And so what Navy did was they kind of won that chess match. If you're going to play prevent defense, we're going to run our triple option and get big chunk plays from the run game. And that's what they did. Marcus turned it into a math word problem, and that he was calculating how much clock was left, how much Navy had to score to win, and he was willing to give up those big chunk plays in the running game to keep the clock moving instead of, playing the regular defense and maybe getting the ball thrown over their heads. So, some of that might have been Marcus's inexperience there. So that's not really on Al Golden. And I think that there have been games where Notre Dame has, especially of late, has made adjustments in the second half and has played pretty good defense. I just think the strategy of playing prevent defense was maybe not the best option there.
Yeah, I don't know how much the defensive adjustments has been to blame. I mean, I think there have been questionable maybe like play calls, like obviously you go all the way back to the Ohio State. It's like why are you blitzing two safeties there? And then there was other times where Al Golden even said I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have left Jaden Mickey on an island. And sure enough, once again, Jaden Mickey gets sort of left on an island against Navy as well, which you feel like you'd be a little bit more confident with that against Navy, but that happened once again. So I think some of it, I guess I don't know that Navy did a ton that Notre Dame wasn't prepared for, but they were just executing it at a higher level. Defense Navy's offense and Notre Dame's defense. Certainly Notre Dame's offense was not helping Navy or Notre Dame's defense against Navy. They couldn't sustain drives. You're
on the field for 10 minutes. You do 3 and out, and your defense is back on the field again.
Yeah, exactly. And the fact that that first drive was so long. The Notre Dame offense just didn't come up with a better plan, or didn't. You'd think like they'd be itching to get back out there. Like we had such a good first half. We waited all this time. Let's go show them what we're made of again. And then they just sort of fell on their face and continued to do it from there for the rest of the game. So in terms of maybe like some red zone things, are there things that Notre Dame can do? I guess I would point to less maybe that Notre Dame needs to be making those in-game adjustments defensively, and just like throughout the entire season, Notre Dame hasn't been good in the red zone defensively. And so that has been surprising to me that we haven't seen a ton of improvement there as the season went on. You would think that Notre Dame would get better. I think there's been a little bit of improvement, but not as soon as I would have expected. And certainly not as much as I would expect it either.
Right. I mean, I wrote Sunday night, Notre Dame is averaging 3.8 points per third quarter. On that trajectory, they're going to have 45 points, third quarter points at the end of the regular season. The last time they had that few points in the regular season was Bob Davies' first year in 1997. They had 27, and they're getting outscored in the third quarter. Notre Dame has only really given up 53, which isn't bad. It's ahead of a lot of years, but the last time Notre Dame got outscored in the third quarter for the season, it was Charlie Weiss's last year, 2009. Now, again, Navy had the ball a lot in the third quarter, so you say, well, they really didn't have much of a chance to score. I mean, 38 points for the season, something's not happening at halftime that needs to be happening on offense. So I'll take Tommy Rees to task a little bit there.
Yeah, it's never a good sign when the phrase "the last time" and Bob Davie are used in a sentence. So that's not a good look for Notre Dame, and something that needs to be fixed as the season wraps up here the next few weeks. All right, next question is from John Dillon. Given that our quarterbacks seem to be chosen by Tommy Rees, who do you see Marcus Freeman being more? Sorry, I'm having trouble reading this one. Do you see Marcus Freeman being more involved in the decision of future quarterbacks we are recruiting?
No trick questions, John. I would say Marcus is pretty involved in terms of forming relationships with them, because we all know that Tommy's professional aspirations are going to take him away from Notre Dame at some point. And so, that's the reason that Marcus is very close with CJ Carr because CJ knows Tommy likely will not coach him throughout his career and may not even be here at the beginning of his Notre Dame career. But I think you're also talking about selecting the quarterbacks, who they're recruiting. I don't know that there's anything wrong with who Tommy Rees has selected. I think maybe it's more the mechanics and the strategy of how long do you stay on certain guys before you zero in on one. And that was the problem in this 2023 cycle. I also think Marcus being around last year, the defensive coordinator really raised Tommy Rees's bar going into the 2023 cycle about the kind of quarterbacks he was looking at, because you think about, he's been here through 2017. And I mean, this is the first year I can remember them really swinging for the fences with, the first offers that went out were all the 5-star guys like Arch Manning and Dante Moore and the big kid in California that's signing with Tennessee. What's his name? Do you remember?
Nico Iamaleava.
Yeah, thank you, gosh. But and Jackson Arnold, and they were on Christopher Vizina and Jackson Arnold before those guys really started to ascend. So they had a good eye for both the 5-stars and the guys that were going to rise to be either 5-stars or near 5-stars. And you look at the 2024 cycle with CJ Carr and Julian Sand, and there were a few others that were kind of in their mix, and they were able to land CJ Carr. So I don't think it's so much who Tommy is selecting now. I think he's made that upgrade. I think it's how to mechanically not have a repeat of the 2023 cycle ever. Even though it's got a kind of a happy ending coming up, possibly with Kenny Minchie.
Yeah, I think I tend to agree with you. I do think they were going after the elite guys, and Tommy Rees and Marcus Freeman were making a push for that. I would say like Marcus Freeman was involved in this 2023 quarterback recruiting cycle. Like he was involved with Dante Moore. It's certainly, I think Tommy Rees has to take some of the blame for not like getting that through the finish line, but Marcus Freeman was aware and abreast of the situation as well. So it's not like Marcus Freeman was just aloof to what was going on. So that just didn't.
But I think he's asking too, did he defer too much to Tommy Rees? If he, does he need to maybe dictate more of that? And I think I'm paraphrasing for you, John. So if I'm misinterpreting your question, there's also the point where Marcus asked Tommy about the transfer portal going into this season.
Sure.
And Tommy said, hey, we've got 2 championship level quarterbacks. We don't need that. That was a direct quote from Marcus to me in a one-on-one I did this summer on tape. So I still have the tape where he said that. So I think maybe that's where John's origination for the question came from.
Sure. Yeah, no, I get that. And I do think that Marcus Freeman will be heavily involved. And I think he'll probably be more comfortable being as hands-on and involved in pushing towards a decision of whether or not, hey, we need to keep recruiting guys, or hey, this is, I don't know exactly if he's going to say, I like this guy better than that guy. Like he might defer to Tommy Rees on that. But I think he's going to weigh in and make sure that this isn't ideal for Notre Dame to be pushing into November without a quarterback commitment. And I think they would like to change it. And it's honestly fairly stunning that Notre Dame has such a good recruiting class without that sort of quarterback presence in it. Like, usually that's a big part of these big recruiting classes, that there's a quarterback that's a little bit of the face of the class that is pushing for other guys. Now Notre Dame has had other people step up.
Drake Bowen,
most notably Drake Bowen. Yeah, as a he's the quarterback of the defense, but and he lives close to campus, so he can get here whenever he wants. And CJ Carr has been playing that role as well as a 2024 quarterback commit. But they need to get things figured out, and there's no reason that it can't. If you get a 2023 quarterback, you hold on to CJ Carr, then you start going for a 2025 quarterback. Now that might sound crazy and thinking way too far ahead, but it's really not in the recruiting world these days. So that's what Notre Dame needs to do. That was our last question for now. If you have some more, feel free to submit them. We'll try to squeeze maybe a couple in at the end. I do want to post this comment because it feels I'm channeling Eric Hansen's live chat. For Wombly says, thanks guys. Don't forget to like the video, folks. So anytime we can put a compliment on screen or some advice from a wise viewer, we want to do that. So for Wombly's, thank you. And thank you for helping us remind people to like the video to help us spread the word. All right, Eric, do you want to maybe highlight a couple things from the game from Saturday?
Sure. So Notre Dame defeated Navy 35-32. It was their 9th win and 10 against the midshipmen, if I'm remembering right, and I might have messed that up. Notre Dame, took a 35-13 lead, blocked a punt late in the first half. They got an interception from Clarence Lewis late in the first half. A lot of people turned the game off. I was talking to a couple of people today that they just were surprised. Wow. They turned the game off and then looked at the final score and they're like, what happened? And I had to retell. I'm like, well, I have articles on this if you want to actually do that. But, and then I think what was alarming in the second half was that I think some of the things that Navy did defensively are transferable to other teams. Now, Navy's been good at this all year. They really are a good run defense this year, and they've decided that they're going to sell out against the run. So they'll put eight or nine people in the box. They'll blitz 8 or 9 people at a time and leave the middle of the field open. And it's easy to gash that if you've got a quarterback and an offensive line and an offensive coordinator that can handle that. And I think at different times, all three of those parts failed in the second half. And that's how you end up with 12 total yards in a game, which is just unthinkable. That sounds like something from the 1890s. And then, and combined with keeping the defense on the field and maybe making a miscalculation with the defense. But certainly, you can look at Boston College and say, well, can they do the same thing? I don't know that that's their MO. They're not a team that normally plays like that. They could certainly adopt some of those principles. USC is the team you got to worry about like that because USC gets lots of sacks, lots of tackles for loss. They're number one in the country in turnovers gained, so they force the most turnovers of anybody, and they do a lot of that with just their front four. If they want to bring extra pressure, Notre Dame has got to learn how to handle what Navy was throwing at them, and I think that's the most critical takeaway from me, that this isn't just a one-off game. Navy's offense you can write off and say, well, they're never going to see anything like that the rest of the season. But from a defensive standpoint, there were things that other teams could learn and use against Notre Dame, so they better get good at those things. It's like hitting a curveball.
Yeah, and the to me, one of the frustrating parts about that was like Navy was doing some of that in the first half, and Notre Dame was able to counteract that, and they just couldn't figure it out in the second half for some reason. Now, I think that was a mix of Drew Pine, the offensive line not getting on the same page, the running backs not pass protecting well. There was a number of different issues there. The play calling, I think, goes into that as well. So there's a number of things there that I think all contributed to the lack of success. But it's interesting. What was that? The Syracuse game? We're like, okay, maybe the answer to playing against Drew Pine is to drop 8. And now it feels like the answer to play Drew Pine is to blitz everyone. So it's like, well, maybe anything can work if you do it well. So yeah. I think there's a number of different things that defenses can do, and that part of the problem is that you don't necessarily. They can line up 8 in the box and then end up still dropping 3, and Notre Dame has to figure that out. Tommy Rees can have Drew Pine scan and tell him to play at the very last second as much as he wants, but some things will change at the snap that maybe they weren't anticipating. So Drew Pine's going to have to be able to read that and make the right decision based off what he's seeing. So I think there were a couple RPOs in the second half that Drew Pine just handed off that I think he could have gotten easy yardage with a quick throw to maybe Jaden Thomas in the slot. And that maybe would have helped Notre Dame's offense get in a better rhythm, because Navy was really selling out, whether it was the pass or the run, and just sort of just trying to blitz the line of scrimmage and crowd the box as much as possible. And whether Notre Dame was passing or running, it didn't really care. It was sort of challenging Notre Dame to have the stones to beat it. And Notre Dame wasn't able to do that in the second half, even though it had shown the ability to do that at times in the first half. So that was a bit confusing.
When you look at Drew Pine's final numbers, you're like, my goodness, it's Joe Montana. 17 of 21 for 269 yards, 4 touchdowns. He did have an interception that was tipped at the line of scrimmage in the second half, sacked 5 times in the second half. Almost all those yards came in the first half. His pass efficiency rating, though, went sky high, which moved him up to number 32. And I mentioned this in my analysis last night, that he's in a virtual tie with the reigning Heisman Trophy winner Bryce Young, who is 31st, and they have basically the same pass efficiency rating, which even as a little snapshot that's temporary, 10 weeks into the season, you're kind of like, what's going on? But
it's a pretty wild stat. It doesn't necessarily match the output, but I mean, maybe it speaks to what Alabama's maybe missing at its wide receiver position as well.
And we should mention a couple of players that got 3 players that got player of the game honors today. Jack Kaiser blocked Notre Dame's 7th punt of the season, which is the most anybody's blocked this season. The NCAA record, if you're wondering, is 11 block punts in a season by Arkansas State in 1975. Braden Lenzy was the offensive player of the game. If you haven't seen the game or haven't seen it on Twitter, he had 5 catches for 67 yards, including a 38-yard touchdown pass where he pulled the ball off the back of the defender and then plucked it, and that was a touchdown. One of the coolest catches I've ever seen. And then the defensive player of the game, I think this is going to make a lot of people happy that have been rooting for Xavier Watts. Made his first career start, had a career high 8 tackles, really played well. I think that you'll see him probably start this weekend, especially if Brandon Joseph is not available.
Yeah, and I think early last week I said I was expecting Xavier Watts to have a big game, and I'm glad he made me at least look smart for saying that, because I said plenty of stupid things about Notre Dame predicting, especially when it comes to predicting things for Notre Dame this season, as I think everyone that has tried to make any predictions about this Notre Dame team has. But yeah, that was nice to see from Xavier Watts. The Braden Lenzy thing I think was nice to see too, because he has been so much better for Notre Dame's offense this season than the stats have shown. He's played very selfless. He's a good blocker. He's a gunner on the punt team when the punt team's done a pretty good job this year. I know what we give all the attention to the punt block team, but the punt team itself has done a good job of limiting punt returns with John Sott with good punts, and then Braden Lenzy and Lorenzo Styles running down there and getting in position as gunners to make sure that there isn't a good return. So to see him have a chance to finally make some plays, contested catches certainly hasn't been Braden Lenzy's strong point throughout his Notre Dame career, and to make the best contested catch from Notre Dame this season. I mean, although I guess the one-handed one that Michael Mayer caught, like sort of diving, and I don't even, he sort of said he wasn't even sure if he saw the football when he caught it. Was pretty crazy too. So Notre Dame has 2 pretty good candidates for one of the catches of the season with those 2 there. But Braden Lenzy wouldn't have been a guy that you would have predicted that would have been on that list, whereas Michael Mayer would have. So nice to see Braden Lenzy have a good game and find ways to impact the offense in the passing game.
Our In the Trenches segment will be short because there wasn't a lot of gloating to do about those guys. I think people were stunned that if Notre Dame could run all over Clemson and kind of push them around and push Syracuse around, why couldn't they do it to Navy? And hopefully we explain schematically what Navy was doing that made it difficult. Remember, Navy is the 6th best run defense in the country. They're the 3rd worst pass efficiency defense in the country. So really the path to beat them, you've got to throw the ball at least some. Air Force, which is the #1 rushing offense in the country, threw for 156 yards against Navy, which is way more than they throw against anybody else. But that you have to mix in some passing. You can't just be stubborn and try to run the ball against Navy, because they will schematically dare you to throw to wide open receivers. And if you're too stubborn to do that, then you're going to suffer for it.
Yeah, the offensive line didn't play great. I think some of the sacks were on the offensive line, and some of it was maybe a lack of communication or incorrect communication between the offensive line and Drew Pine. There was one particularly where they all slid to the right, and Joe Alt and Jarrett Patterson ended up not blocking anyone, and that can't be the play. Like that can't be what Notre Dame was intending to do.
Yeah, Marcus said that was a bad protection slide.
Yeah,
So,
I don't. Yeah, he didn't necessarily say which one specifically, but my assumption is that that was that one.
yeah,
and
he didn't say it was that one. He didn't say Tyler's one.
And I did point that I was a little troubled by some of the comments that I was getting sent to me post game and throughout the game, that I went back as soon as the game was over, and I got back in the press conference got back in the press box after the post game press conference and went back and reviewed those sacks, because everyone seemed to be blaming Drew Pine on all of those, and he was not the person to blame on all of those. Logan Diggs left him out in a bad spot by missing on a pass protection. Michael Mayer didn't help him out in a pass protection situation. And then the one I mentioned where the offensive line sort of slid one way. Now, I don't know for sure, is Drew Pine making that decision at the last minute of how they're sliding? Or is that a Jarrett Patterson, Zeke Carell decision? I don't know that for certain. I think there's some back and forth there that can happen to make those decisions. But there were some instances there that Drew Pine could have been helped out by his teammates a little bit better, but also he had some blame as well. I think there were some other.
He deserves some blame, because I would imagine there's hot reads built into a lot of those blitzes, and he's got to recognize those.
Yeah, but not
I
all
think
of them.
Not all of them, but I think that's on Tommy Reese too.
Right? Yeah, there was one where Josh Lugg and Zeke Carell handled the stunt poorly. And there's no one for him to throw to short. Like, there's just not an option for him. The one where Michael Mayer missed the block, the only person that's running a route is Braden Lindsey. Now, Drew Pine could have thrown it right away when he hit the back of his drop and given Braden Lindsey a chance, but I think he took for granted that, hey, I got 9 guys blocking for me, I should have enough time to get this pass off, and that split second made the difference between him getting sacked and potentially throwing a touchdown pass to Braden Lindsey. So it can be, the margin of error can be that small, because that's what Navy is trying to force on you when it's bringing so many guys and putting so many guys at the line of scrimmage and making them come at different spots, and making sure this guy's blitzing and this guy's not blitzing. This defensive lineman is dropping into cover. I mean, that's what happened on the first touchdown pass to Audric Estime. There was a defensive lineman that was in charge of trying to cover Audric Estime, and we all saw how that went, and that would have been potentially something that you would have hoped Notre Dame could find a way to get the ball to a running back like that out of the backfield in the second half, but they didn't do that. And I didn't see a ton of those opportunities for Drew Pine to do that. So maybe there could have been some better play calls to allow for that.
I agree. Okay, where do you want to go next, Tyler? Do you want to talk about Boston College? Do you want to do some more questions? Or would you like to tell jokes?
We have one more question here. Let's do that, and then we'll do a little bit of Boston College preview. I don't have any jokes fresh, but maybe we can come up with some on the way out.
I have is 7-year-old grandson jokes.
All right. This one is from Michael. Do either of you anticipate the possibility of moving Chris Tyree to slot wide receiver? Tyree needs to be positioned to make plays in space. I don't understand why we continue to see him running plays up the middle for him.
Well, he's a complete. I think he's a complete back. He's not the best guy to run up the middle. You don't want to tip your plays, but I do think, especially with just 6 wide receivers on the roster, him playing more slot is good. I like the fact, though, that you can change the formation and have it be a 2-back set, or you can split him out. So I like that versatility. I don't want to make him a full-time slot guy right now. But yeah, I can understand the frustration of running him up the middle and getting 3 yards when you say, geez, Audric Estime would have gotten 8 on that play. But I think we might have even talked about this on last week's show. I think maybe his future next year would be at slot receiver with all the running backs Notre Dame's going to have. Right now, it looks like they'll have 8 and some pretty good ones.
Yeah, I think that's something that should be entertained next season. Now, maybe Chris Tyree doesn't want to do that. I don't know. And he
Let's
could
ask him.
he could look at an option to maybe if that's what Notre Dame wants to do. Maybe he'd say, well, maybe I'll just go somewhere else then.
Yeah,
I can play running back, but that is something that I think Notre Dame needs to consider. I'm not as hip on it for the rest of the season. I do like I mean, you don't have to sell me on the 2-back thing. I've been pounding the table on the more they could do that, the better. I haven't done the tabulations for how it fared against Navy. I think there was at least one early running play that I was like, oh man, they're really killing the 2-back sets there because it only picked up like 2 or 3 yards. But until leading into the Navy game and Drew Pine starts, that when they have 2 backs on the field, they've been averaging 9 yards per play. So I don't think that they did much of that in the second half. That would have been another thing. Like, well, if you're gonna struggle, if Navy's gonna put so many guys in the box, maybe give some mixed directions going with the different running backs and have them. Sort of give Navy some of its own medicine where you're not exactly running a triple option, but there are 3 different options that you could potentially do with 2 running backs back there. So I think that's something that I also maybe could have, and those can be easy throws too. Like I think they were averaging 14 yards a pass play on those too. So you get the ball out to Chris Tyree in the flat pretty easily out of 2-back sets sometimes as well. So I think that Chris Tyree's future could be there. I don't think it's there right now, and like you said, he can't be extremely predictable whenever he's in the game, but it is hard with the way how well Logan Diggs and Audric Estime have played. Anytime you see him get a carry and not make the most of it, it's like, man, that could have been something that maybe Audric Estime or Logan Diggs did better with. All right, Eric, can you give us a quick snapshot of what Notre Dame's up against on Saturday with Boston College coming to town?
Well, when you look at them statistically, they're very similar to Stanford, which, offensively, Notre Dame shouldn't have had an issue with and really didn't. But they're the worst rushing team in the country. They are one of the worst in third down conversions. They're one of the worst in scoring offense, worst in total offense. They turn the ball over a lot on offense. They're 112th in turnovers lost. What do they do well offensively? They throw the ball a lot, and they have a really good receiver in Zay Flowers. And so Notre Dame's going to have to be aware of him on the field. They have one of the worst offensive lines in the country, 126th out of 131 in sacks allowed. So Notre Dame needs to be aggressive and really put that offense out of commission early. Defensively, they're better on defense than they are on offense, but no great shakes. Probably the best things they do, they get a lot of tackles for loss. They're 30th there. They're 39th in third down defense. But 82nd in run defense, 74th in pass defense. Notre Dame can really present a balanced look to them and should be able to move the ball against them. But again, we saw similar numbers against Stanford. So Tommy Rees needs to come up with a really good game plan. Again, if you weren't with us at the beginning of the show, Phil Jacobic's not going to play. Emmett Moorhead, a redshirt freshman who's burning it up the last 2 weeks, is going to play. Phil is injured, but we will likely see George Takis, the former Irish tight end.
Yeah, and just to illustrate how bad Boston College rushing offense is, they're averaging 61.4 yards per game, and that is half as much as the 103rd rushing offense in the country at Texas A&M. So you could rush twice as much per game as Boston College and still be outside of the top 100 in rushing offense. That's how bad Boston College's rushing attack has been.
There's a Texas A&M joke and NIL in there somewhere, but I'm going to leave it alone. I don't want to get Carter Carls mad at me.
Texas A&M has plenty of issues they're dealing with. I can't imagine that they're paying attention to our show, or Carter Carls is for that matter. But yeah, you riddled off all those bad stats for Boston College, and my thought is, well, I guess it's going to be a good game then, because that's sort of been how this season has been for Notre Dame. The teams you don't expect Notre Dame to be in a tight game with, they have been in a tight game with, and we'll see if that proves to be the case once again in Notre Dame's final home game of the season, senior day, and one more chance to say goodbye to some guys playing their last games in Notre Dame Stadium.
It'll be in cold weather. If you're coming to the game or if you're wondering about field conditions or whatever, it's going to be, I think, a high of 29 degrees on Saturday.
That's right. We will be bundled up as well and ready for whatever weather gets thrown at us, because I was greeted by snow when I got back from Baltimore this weekend. You get to Chicago, it looked fine. It was cold there, but there was no snow. But of course, there's plenty of snow here in South Bend. So thank you everybody for tuning in live or watching this on the replay. Please subscribe to receive reminders for future shows, and throw us a like. And in the comments, tell us whether you think Notre Dame should continue playing Navy or not in the future. Next on the agenda for us is our Inside ND Sports podcast, which we will record on Tuesday. And we'll be back here on YouTube Friday with our Place Your Bets predictions for the Boston College game. And as always, there's written content for you on InsideNDSports.com and plenty of discussion happening on the Insider Lounge. Have a good Monday.